I have to be candid and say to you, in 2009, when I ran against Bing, I do not believe we lost. We did the recount. I couldn't believe that the results were so contrary to what my internal polling was showing, what our phone bank was showing, what our union phone bank was showing, what our neighborhood phone banks were showing. When we did the recount and discovered through the checking of the seals, because they didn't want to check the bottom seals on the cases until I got on the floor and looked at the bottom seal. And that's when my breath left me, because the seal had been changed. And it wasn't just one case, it was dozens and dozens and dozens of cases. It is so far from the public's belief that something like this could occur in this date and time that it was hard for people to imagine it and would be very quick to want to dismiss. And those who did it by hacking the computer knew what they were doing. We took it and challenged it all the way through the court system up to the Supreme Court of the state of Michigan. Nobody would touch it because it resulted in the election not only of somebody who I think was not elected, but of the council people, as well as a $500 million bond issue, which ultimately has led to now the privatizing of our schools using our tax money to do it. So they had to have him there. So when you say that I ran, I do not believe that I lost to Mr. Bing. I believe that that election was stolen. I know who it is who did it. I know how they did it. They know I know how they did it. And they know that I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. So we've created a very strong ballot security program. Had I been in charge, we would not be confronted with what we're being confronted with now. The wholesale disrespect, the disregard of Detroit as the state's largest city, this false financial crisis that's created by ineptness and the ability to grasp and understand financial statements and information, debentures, contracts, how all of this works. We have embedded state operatives, which should never be there. They bring nothing to the table in terms of skill set, and that does not mean that I'm angry, but it disturbs me as a person who's lived here all my life, because I'm seeing us being taken advantage of. And I see them disrespecting us and now moving to remove our resources, one at a time, one at a time. They're knocking off those things that we as Detroiters have controlled and owned, and they're making it appear by creating a false sense of devaluing. For example, they devalued Cobo Hall. Just by letting a little water drip down, they then made that sound like the whole place was falling down, which led to the creation of an authority. Under our charter, that never should have been able to be transferred. They just disregard it. Belle Isle, what they're attempting to do now to remove that from us, because they see Detroit resurging and they want those resources. So Detroit just lacks energy, vision, and lacks the skills, the financial skills, to be able to understand the things that we're going to be confronted with for the next 10, 15 years. And that's why I think I'm substantially different than any of the other candidates will be, as well as my years, being 64 now. I just turned 64 a couple of days ago, as well as my years of wisdom as a result of that. None of the other candidates frighten me. I mean, I challenged Coleman Young. That was the frightening, having done that. So it's not the candidates. I will tell you candidly, I do not respect Mr. Duggan. I don't respect him. I will view him as what he is. I will describe him as what he is. And I think he should be aware that if ever we're in that situation, I know what we know. I know what I know about him, which he is hopeful won't be discussed. So I look at the other candidates, and I think I'm substantially different from them. I have no intention of attacking any of the other candidates. That will never happen. I will never say anything bad about them. I will distinguish what our abilities and skills are and the way our understanding is. But I will make it clear about him that I don't respect him. And that, this is not where you need to be, man. You need to be right back out there where you came from and run for that. You're not ready for this here. And you can't sell a bad product. He's a bad product. And you can ask Mr. Romney and the Republican Party about that, how much they were able to spend to wind up carrying Detroit. So I don't have any reluctances about the finances. I think that'll come. We're very well organized. To me, the biggest challenge that we face now is bringing back our political control. What they're doing to us is unconstitutional. It's not been challenged. The Michigan Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, says that you cannot take away a political subdivision's political rights, a subdivision's political rights under the Constitution. Everything that they have done by using the law, unconstitutional laws, is designed to encroach upon our sovereignty, our home rule, notwithstanding the fact that we are a creature of the state. I think that's it. Once we can get control back of ourselves and can control our own resources and get rid of these embedded state operatives, I believe that there's, in my view, I believe that the memorandum of understanding was illegal. It was entered into illegally. I believe this consent agreement was entered into illegally. I believe that much of what they're doing it now, trying to make it de facto right. They hired Miller Canfield after they'd already employed Miller Canfield without a contract. That's illegal. You can't do that. But they will willy-nilly just simply wink at the law when it's not on their side, and when it is on their side, they point to it. But that's, again, the lack of respect that they see towards us. In my view, it's contempt. And I'm not reluctant to say it, and it will probably make some folks disturbed, but it's something that needs to be talked about. When you're cutting the workers, the DPW, you're cutting back on the police and fire and EMS wages and all the city's wages, all you're doing is affecting the general fund. The general fund already has the general fund is generating a substantial excess of revenue over expenses. Substantial. So all you're doing is affecting that. What is drawing down the general fund, and this is where it comes into understanding the financial statements, is there's a number after excess of revenue over expense called transfers. Hundreds of millions of dollars is going out in transfers. So now the question is, where are these transfers going? That is, they're siphoning off the money from the general fund to do something else with. It's going to a variety of different little pots that need to be dealt with. For example, federal programs that are fully funded through federal monies. But to the public, it looks as if this is owned and controlled by the city of Detroit. Well, frankly, it's money that passes from the federal government up to the state and then down to the city. When the state doesn't pay us the money that we're due as a result of these federal programs because they're controlled through them, we then have to use money out of the general fund to pay for those federal programs. Therefore, there's a transfer. There's transfers happening to other sub-governmental funds. All this gets down to understanding how the flow of financial statements work in municipalities. I have that skill set because we audited a number of cities, so I know how that all works. The debt's an issue. I can't get my arms around the debt till I get inside the tent and see just how it's functioning and what's happening there. But I can tell you this from experience. The auditors, who I'm sure now are great independent auditors, I don't want to impugn them in any kind of way. But once folks start to buy into this whole government plan of taking over Detroit, things will be done way behind the scenes that the public will never see, that will never rise to the light of day, to manipulate this. For example, the state of Michigan controlling the federal funds that come down to the state. Therefore, we close the health department, but we then sublet it out to somebody else. Now that money goes over to them, and yet it was fully funded through federal funds. Human resources, we close it, we subcontract it out. This is all designed to privatize. That's why they let Belle Isle atrophy. Belle Isle we can do all this ourselves. We can create our own authority, and I happen to have brought with me today our proposal for Belle Isle Park Authority. That's pretty detailed, but it's controlled by Detroit. I think we can do that ourselves. So I see this as all a manipulation to get to our resources, to get to our assets. And if it's real, to the extent something's real, I'll deal with it. But I got to know that it's real. And everything I see now doesn't suggest to me it's real. The final thing I'll say on that, if you watch how the goalpost moves on running out of cash. One moment we're running out of cash by November 1st. And when I looked at the cash flow projections and the cash forecast, those are two different things. They sound like the same thing to the public, but I know technically they're two different things. We put out release after release saying we're not running out of cash. It's a red herring, folks. We're not going to run out of cash way before November 1st. Now comes November 1st or November 7th, and all of a sudden it gets quiet. We didn't run out of cash. and the state says, we're not going to give you this money if you don't hire Miller Canfield, and if you don't hire Ernst & Young, and if you don't hire this firm out of Doohickey or wherever that place was out of Washington, D.C., we're not going to give you this cash. So the council bucked. And did we run out of cash? No. November comes and goes. Well, you're going to run out of cash in December if you don't do these things. We kept telling folks, you're not running out of cash. The financials and the forecasts don't show that. And then we didn't. And then Bing had to wind up admitting that looks like we'll have enough cash to last through the spring. Now, when they got rid of Crystal Crittenden, and then they just passed the things that they did, now the governor says, well, we're going to release $20 million more. And Bing says, well, I'll decide when we're going to draw down on that. But what he's telling you is, we don't need that money. But my problem is, how in the hang in the first place did you, City of Detroit, allow ourselves to be placed in a position to borrow money, and the man up there is controlling the money? And it's us who've got to pay the money. That's another further insult. I believe that crime is emanating from really three things. I think there's a breakdown of the family unit. Many young folks, not all, some young folks have been raised by young people, and they don't have a respect for authority. Secondly, education is a problem, because if you're not educated, and if you don't stay in there in the system and then allow yourself to get educated, it's going to be tough to make a living, and therefore you're going to turn to antisocial activities. Third, jobs. Jobs and jobs. And that's why it disturbs me that we start whacking city employees and whacking other folks one after another, then privatizing it. And then the same people will turn around and tell you how your crime's out of control. When these people then have to turn around and go and start engaging in antisocial behavior in order to be able to feed themselves. It is complicated, and it involves the police, but it also involves the community. We all have to come together. A mayor's got to be up amongst your folks. You can't be scared to walk amongst your people.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's a huge problem we have here, because our mayor doesn't. And I liked Archer, but what they liked about Kwame, quite frankly, is they felt Kwame was one of them.
Yes.
And you could walk amongst them, and you could touch them. And I think that's what we've been missing and haven't had it since Coleman Young died. In my view, again, Coleman may have stayed too long, and that's what I thought. He stayed just one time too long. Unquestionably. I will do it in such a way that it'll just make so much sense, I'll do the Snyder on him. I'll make it sound like this is just the right thing that needs to do. You all want this consent agreement and all, but geez, you can have, but we really need to do it right. Now you owe us, a couple $100 million because, we first had this agreement with you that we were going to lower our income tax rate in return for which you're going to continue our revenue sharing. Well, Mr. Governor, now you tell us that, well, it was a different governor, it was a different legislature. Well, you're suggesting to me that that a contract entered into is not a contract that's binding upon the entity who entered into the contract. So if I contract with General Motors, I don't care who the chairman of General Motors is. If you breach it, I'm going to sue you. If the shoe was on the other foot, they would sue us in a hot minute, and they reach down and take the Coleman Young building if they got a judgment. So the reality is, the long answer is absolutely. I see it all as having been wrong in the first place, and I think they did it ultra-virusly now. They're making it seem as if it's legal when it has never been legal in the first place. They violated our charter even getting there. You have to meet with these business folks. I think the Dan Gilberts of the world and all the others who are along here, they need to understand that, while it's great downtown, and we're all supportive of downtown. We all want a strong, vibrant downtown. But the quality of life's got to be good in the neighborhoods, which means we got to get jobs out to folks, not just folks who got college degrees, but we got to get jobs down to folks who don't have that. And we have to now sit and talk, all right, how do we create these jobs? And then what incentives do we give you to now hire these folks and then make sure that you're doing it? A lot of these folks come in and say, we're going to do this for this many jobs. And then, we fall for that okey doke. And then no one ever checks. The man who does it never delivers, and no one ever knows he never delivered. And everybody thinks by now we should be at full employment in Detroit based upon all the promises. So I think it means meeting with the parties. The business community needs to meet with the regular community. I need to chair that. And they need to sit across the table. And there needs to be a discussion on black versus white and why Detroiters think differently than folks who aren't living it every day. Now, they're all Detroiters of some degree, but the people who live here have a special status. It is a status that's brought about as a result of being a resident, and you're enjoying and you're living the services. So when I see this job thing, the job thing, I think we have to bring folks together to create them and let them understand it. And then, my view, I'm going to try to create some new businesses. I think there's a lot of, particularly in the minority community, I think we have some of the best talent. We can make a great product. We can create a great service. Our problem is that we don't have the training in terms of the back end. We know the front end, but we don't know the back end. So I say I can take $10,000 or $20,000 from a grant, and if you come to me and you got your little idea, I'm not going to set you up in business. If you got a little piece of money for yourself and you can get your little place and get yourself, but you got to come in with your accountant. You got to come in and your accountant's going to have to testify or to attest that he's going to be there all along or she's going to be there all along. And if you come in with your little QuickBooks program and you got your little business, so you got the back end right, we're going to help you. We're going to help you create those, because when I leave, my legacy is going to be that Barrow's been through here, and that's how you all got all these jobs that are happening. We got to stimulate our own. We don't own the businesses in Detroit anymore. You see them just graduate. We're eroding. We're eroding, not because we don't have the ability, we don't have access to capital. The light rail is not going far enough. It needs to go beyond the boulevard. That's not remarkably different from the people mover. I mean, it's not like somebody's going to ride in from Ferndale and Royal Oak and Birmingham on Smart and then get off at the boulevard and then ride this down. That's just not going to happen. I would really prefer to see it go much further. But notwithstanding that, to the extent, and I know they're trying to create this authority, let me tell you how I view that authority process. I'm all great if you're going to create an authority and everybody starts at zero and nobody has to put in anything, then I'm fine. You can do, you can whatever. But if I got to put something into your pot and you got to put something into the pot, and I'm putting more into the pot than you are, for example, you put SMART in the pot, which is tiny, and I put DDOT into the pot, which is massive, and SMART's riders are really DDOT riders who just go so far and have to get off and get on SMART, then it's illogical for you to be able to have more say than what I have. Would you want me to do that, Mr. Businessman, if the shoe was reversed? Of course not. You would be very quick to point out that difference. Now I see that the argument has morphed to, well, I have SMART is a profitable system and yours is not a profitable system. That's the argument that Brooks Patterson makes. Well, Mr. Patterson, SMART is subsidized by Tri-County. You get government, a tax for SMART. We don't have that for DDOT. But we've been able to subsist and to exist and to grow our operation. So I think that the whole light rail system and all of this that's happening on Woodward and this whole concept of the authority, to the extent Detroiters are going to participate, there's no doubt in my mind, we will find a way that you'll have to make sure that the folks who can't get jobs, these people without the college degrees, the college degree folks they need help too, but they're going to take care of themselves. It's the people who don't have high school diplomas. We got a lot of folks in Detroit like that. And those are the ones who are staying. And those are the ones who are catch and hang every single day. And I see it all the time. So I would do everything I could. We privatize public lighting in favor of DTE taking over and providing these services. Why are we doing that when we can do this ourselves? We can make it work and efficient. We can now we're selling it already to the public schools, to the school buildings. We're selling it to the downtown buildings. We're selling it to the electricity to run up and down the streets and so on and so forth. And we can go beyond that if only we would. But that was being blocked because DTE knew that they would get the business. So they put in their tie lines. They tapped into our tie lines. And they had our people, as part of the winding down process, enhance their operation in terms of the tie lines. I believe that Detroit should continue to do what they were doing. I will look into how that is being done. I believe that DTE will do just like they do to people at their houses. You're going to come up with a big bill one day, and no one's going to know how you computed that bill. That's going to be all up in your head. And when you're going to reach over, you're going to pull out the plug. And you're going to talk about, you're going to talk about, and you're going to run up in there, and you're going to run up in there, you're going to take the little street lights out, you're going to disconnect the electricity, and then your folks over at the media are going to make it look like we just so inept and some people just don't pay our bills and so on and so forth. Not that we are disagreeing with the bill, but I've seen it. I don't think we needed an authority.
Okay.
That's designed to be able to make it easy to transfer assets into this authority that will be controlled by DTE. That's a Republican ploy designed to get access to get control over the assets. It's absurd. Public safety, which means police, fire, EMS. I see all those having to be delivered. I see economic development is a core service that we need to be involved in. Parks and Rec is a core service we need to be involved in. I really, quite frankly with you, don't see very many services that the city provides that are just superfluous. I don't see that. I see them all as being essential services. I don't see if there's some efficiencies to occur, which our charter allows us to combine departments if we need to, if I see that potential for those efficiencies, well then we'll talk about it. But I see Detroit's biggest problem is our systems are antiquated. We aren't using the latest in technology. Number one, I think, is public safety. I think public safety and delivering those fundamental services, EMS, police services, those core safety services, fire. Now, it can be 10, 12, 14 minutes before the fire truck comes. And then it's only going to be an engine. That's one of the first things that I would begin to address, because that's perceived as the quality of life in Detroit.